Sir, and go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I also trust that everybody can see the presentation. If not, I do have the chat window up for just a second, so let me know if you can't see it or if you can see it, but it looks like it's on the little square there. I'm gonna come over to this here. Okay, awesome. So thank you, everybody. I am welcoming to this presentation of UX Burnout. I want to thank you all for joining, as well as thank Design by South Africa for hosting this virtual conference and finding a way for us all to come together and share knowledge, really even in these crazy times. As I said, my name is Sarah Hoaglan. I've been in the UX industry for about 13 years. I'm currently a lead designer at the Home Depot, which for those of you that are unfamiliar, the Home Depot is a leader in the home improvement space. It's a very large company. We currently rank 26th on the American Fortune 500 and 59 on the Global Fortune 500. So although this might not be normal, I do want to start the presentation with a bit of a disclaimer. Some of what I'm going to talk about might seem fairly petty, like a rant of complaints, and some people, you may just find it annoying, and I get it. Like, I've also battled the lines of, am I just complaining, but also being honest about the content in the presentation. And so the things I'll cover are things that so many people have felt or are actively feeling. No one's openly talking about it. And if you're a new designer and haven't yet experienced some of these things, this might help improve awareness so that you're prepared if you encounter, similar experiences. And ultimately, I kind of hope that with this presentation, we can just kind of have the conversation with a little humor and without judgment. So to understand how I got to a place of burnout, we must start with my background. And there are so many UXers that are passionate about what you do. So maybe your journey is similar. And I started my career in 2008 as a UX intern. And over the next several years, I worked diligently to learn and absorb as much information as I could. I built a solid foundation on a gamut of UX experience, including research, design, accessibility, validation. And then in 2014, I decided that it would be challenging for me to continue to grow my career with the limited UX opportunities I had in my hometown, which was Wichita, Kansas. And it's not a tiny town, but it is in the farmland, heartland of America. And it just wasn't enough for a tech industry or a tech job. So me and my two dogs, I picked us up. I moved to the big city of Dallas, where I had accepted my first lead position. And by the end of that year, I had also started my own LLC. I was doing side hustles. So on top of my regular full-time job, I became a part of the Dallas UX community. I was attending meetups. I was joining designer groups and doing UX community projects, even outside of work. And then by 2017, I was leading teams of designers across multiple continents, winning awards at my companies. I was being recognized by executive leadership, and my drive didn't stop with education. My drive didn't stop with work experience. I continued to pursue education, getting my degrees as I was taught to do, getting my master's, completing a certification in graphic design. And this slide is not meant to brag. It's meant to have a share so that we can get to a shared understanding about how somebody, especially again, passionate UXers who I know so many people have followed very similar journeys, how we get to a place of burnout. So in 2017 was really when I started coming across articles talking about the end of UX. And I was surprised. I mean, how can a career that I had just put so much effort into starting just as quickly be labeled as ending? And I found article after article about how UX should be a dying field, is a dying field, and for whatever various reasons. And I was shocked when I first read this. UX was how I was able to buy expensive memory foam mattresses for my dogs, and once in a while I valeted my car because I had a good job. And honestly, it's kind of what put a roof over my head. I mean, I identified myself with my career. I was proud of my job. I mean, I guess it really didn't matter that my family still asked if I could fix their broken computer screen. I mean, even though I've said the same thing for many, many years, that's not quite what I do. At least, I was proud of what I was doing. And honestly, how can UX be a dying field when the job opportunities are plentiful, right? Every company now wants this UX thing. And as long as you can navigate the ever changing and very inconsistent landscape of your job title, whether that be UX designer, UI designer, UX UI designer, interface designer, product designer, brand designer, not to mention sorting through the varying roles of definitions with probably generally the same output. But whatever on that. Okay. So the death of UX, right? I mean, don't they mean the breadth of UX? I mean, have they forgotten that everything that we do and all of the job responsibilities that we have? I mean, we research, we design, we validate, and I generally have to step in for QA once in a while. And we stand up for better processes. We generally are arguing with people for better quality. I'm fighting for UX doable timelines. And I'll be honest, I've probably begged somebody for a user-driven roadmap. I kind of sound bitter. I get it, but I had a disclaimer, so you knew what you were getting into. And honestly, how can UX be dying when user experience is embedded kind of into emerging technologies, right? I can think of so many people right now on LinkedIn that are doing some really cool things like AR, VR, digital realities, conversational UI, NLP and machine learning. With that said, being in enterprise design, never mind that I can't even get my developer to move a text field by 3 pixels, right? But whatever, again, it is what it is. So, and then finally, when I did get to do that cool thing, how many times did I design something and I was like, man, this is it, right? We've validated, we've tested, people love this, just for priorities to shift. And now my work transitions to a new feature with now a new compressed timeline. Ugh. And without UX, I mean, who would be left to deal with all the unnecessary obstacles that we generally have to deal with? I mean, how often have you heard these things? Too much white space. We don't have time for responsive design. Yeah, our front-end framework doesn't quite support that interaction. And accessibility isn't a requirement. That font isn't trendy. And no scrolling, everything above the fold. And my favorite one, everyone is a designer these days. Ugh, right? Like, what is going on? Why was I so irritated? And why did I honestly kind of sound so self-absorbed? Like, other professions don't also go through this? And I started thinking to myself, gosh, am I just the millennial, right? That is just difficult to work with? And then I thought, gosh, no, like I am just burnt out. And so burnout is now recognized as an occupational phenomenon by the World Health Organization and is listed in the 11th revision of International Classification of Diseases. As you can see here, it's defined by a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And it's defined by 3 characteristics: feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. And I mean, it made sense. Clearly, I was exhausted from the day to day. It wasn't like me to have such a negative outlook, and my mental energy was definitely depleted because I had these blurred lines of the UXer I was and the one I thought I should be. Again, looking at those LinkedIn articles and all these people doing really cool things. There were days when I had a real reluctance to go to work and battle through some of these obstacles day in and day out. And there were days I hated my job when I left work. And there were days I considered my career choices. Maybe I should have been a veterinarian. Would pineapple picking really be that bad as long as I was in Hawaii? I mean, these were things I contemplated. And it turns out I wasn't alone. Just look at these tough comments from some of my professional colleagues in the UX industry. And maybe some of you can relate to some of these. I sometimes get jealous of the work my friends in UX are doing. I'm drained because my stakeholders only think I quote unquote make things pretty. I'm sure many of us have heard this. Some of my work makes me lose sight of why I wanted a career in UX. And the toughest one of them all, I quit my job and I wasn't sure if I'd ever go back to tech. I mean, burnout is real. And even if we don't like to call it something, even if we don't want to admit to it, we can't deny the weight of these comments. We can't deny how people are feeling. And we really need to be understanding that these things are happening in our job and how they make us feel. So, now what? And to tackle burnout, I did what every online article said I should do, right? I took baths. I did a lot of yoga. I took vacations. I pampered myself with face masks. And while my skin was softer, these things really didn't help with my feelings about my UX career. So I continued to ask myself, now what? And while everyone's experience might not be the same, I finally found things that help me get to a place where I can now say that I've overcome many of these negative feelings associated with burnout. It took a few years of probably from start to finish. So it's not like an overnight journey, but I wanted to share those things with you guys. So in regards to tackling burnout, the first thing was recognizing the problem as directly related to UX. So it was the negative aspects of my UX career, the things I talked about earlier, those obstacles that we hear day in and day out, that was really leading to my burnout. It wasn't just work in general, it was the nuances of UX work. And so no matter what job I went to, and for a couple of years, I was again trying to change jobs to find something that I was happier with and happier with and happier with, I would face these same challenges. So starting over with a different company meant nothing if I didn't have appropriate expectations about what the job was doing versus, at that point, what the company at that point was doing. So harnessing your network. So I had several different conversations with mentors and other leaders. Some came at the problem with a softer support, helping me rediscover the value that I was providing. Others were very real with me. Suck it up. You stop complaining. You're in a good industry. You make good money. And even though I preferred that softer strategy, both were very good and both were very helpful. I have a strong network of people I very, very much trust, and it's something I couldn't support or encourage enough. So loving where you work. So it's really hard to get past a place of burnout if you're in an unsupportive or an unhealthy environment. Because you can love what you do. You can not have some of these obstacles and some of these challenges, but still be in a very negative or a very hostile working environment. And you're never going to get to a place where you're ultimately, out of the weeds of burnout. So I highly encourage you to find a team and a company that you can be proud of. For the last 5 years, I've been fortunate enough to be employed at companies with teams that I love under really good UX leadership and with companies who put their people first. And so you can guarantee that the next job of my journey, no matter what that might be or when, will be vetted to ensure the fit of the team and the company will ultimately make me happy. And this is something I couldn't like scream loud enough about its importance. So something else I had to do is move to an industry that was interesting to me, because for at least if I had to deal with some of these obstacles, being in an industry where the work was fun for me was such a help. For me, this would be industry and retail, which is where I'm at now with the Home Depot. My previous position, travel, and anything animal related, which I haven't gotten into yet, but I would be happy for the rest of my days if it was animal related. It's ultimately easier to have fun at your job if your work is related, again, to your interest or your hobby. And find professional alternatives. So there was a point where I just didn't want to think about my job anymore. I was so burnt out from that day to day, but I still wanted to not be irrelevant in my career. So I found alternatives outside of my job that really made me feel like I was having a professional impact. In 2019, I started teaching courses at a university about UX and the product development lifecycle. And so, although related to my job, it was really fun to be able to work with new people in the industry, coach and mentor people. And I very much took a liking to that. And I still felt like I had value in my space. I also completed several conference talks, which allowed me to focus energy into the topics that I really care most about, this being one of them. And I have friends that have become mentors in some of those UX boot camps. And they've found a lot of very much value to themselves in those as well. And the last tip is specializing in something. So you might find that if you narrow your role into a specialty that interests you, or something you can get really good at, then again, those nuances don't become so overwhelming and do become just kind of part of the job, part of life. And there are different things that you can definitely specialize in, linguistics, natural language processing, accessibility. There's a whole range of something. So I would encourage those that are very generalist and you're feeling like you're just kind of overwhelmed with all the things you need to do, try a specialty. And it doesn't have to be forever, try it for a little bit. Some of my most fun projects were when I was doing conversational UI at my previous position, and I really loved that space, and it just made me happy there. So I want to provide some kind of final thoughts. I want to go back to a second on the World Health Organization's definition of burnout, specifically the part stress that has not been managed well. And this really resonated with me because much of what I was feeling probably was because I was putting undue stress on myself and what value really meant. And this is not just me. I've talked to many UXers. I've not only for this presentation, but I have a large network. And like many of them, like many of you, I'm sure we have a real passion for making the best experiences all the time for all the users of my product. And so that drive to just, we must do it right. We must do it perfect. We must do it better. Why are we not listening to our users? That passion ultimately led to the stress. And so the desire to be more in my profession made me lose sight sometimes of the value that I was providing at the time that the teams I supported needed it, the products I designed for, what they needed, and the companies that needed me for different things at different times. And so I implore you to don't lose sight of the value that you provide. And sometimes, again, recognition, the awareness, the value that you're providing is working through those nuances, is fighting for accessibility, is moving that text button over by 3 pixels, because that is what makes the perfect experience, a good experience. And so fighting through that and understanding that is value certainly went a long way for me. And I would also encourage you, if you are feeling burned out, if you're feeling overstressed about the day-to-day UX job, then I would encourage you to reach out to your network of support. Obviously, we're all here. The work we do is valuable. Our work does matter. And again, for new designers, I hope that you will take this and recognize the value you're providing when you do stumble upon these obstacles. And that's it. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that's an incredibly important point that you've raised, that people should be gentle with themselves. We work in a really tough industry where the timing is insane. As Dean has mentioned, sometimes not for the right reasons. And I really love your quote about wondering wondering whether picking pineapples would be that bad if it's in Hawaii. I think we've all considered these elaborate scenarios of, starting a beach bar in Jamaica, thinking I can just live off peanuts, perhaps. Does anyone have any questions for Sarah? Leo?
I think it was really, really good and relatable talk. I think I've experienced burnout a few times. I think my personality and my strengths actually push me to burnouts quite quickly. But the one thing that I really liked is the team that I currently surround myself with are quite supportive of that. And we've actually openly discussed on numerous occasions of burnout. And I feel like it helps when there's an open space to actually talk about these things. It's to tell your team I feel burnt out, so just taking a step back and then reevaluating. But I found that most recently, actually, just talking as you're working, because like a colleague of mine, we just ended up talking as we were going through the work, and you end up actually taking your mind away from how stressful something is, and you're actually distracting yourself. So I found that also worked a little bit more. But yeah, definitely a good talk. It's good to know that even people that are higher up, because as a junior, you think this is your only experience itself. It's good to know that even a senior or intermediate will experience the same thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, so I appreciate you coming up and talking about that. I couldn't agree with you more. A team and that you're happy with, a team that is supportive, is just so important. I definitely I started my burnout journey in my previous position, and I was there for a little over about 4 years. And the first year was that feeling of just burnt out, and it was really from the previous position to that. But being in a team in my last company that was amazing, and I had such good leadership, I had such a strong team of designers around me. The last 3 years of my job last year really helped me get to a point where I started just being more okay with the day-to-days. Like you, Leo, I'm also very tenacious in my drive to want to succeed. And like you, I find that constantly, if I don't check myself, will put me into a place of being more stressed out, and can easily just get burnt out.
Yeah. But thanks. It was a good talk.
Yes, I agree completely with what you guys are saying. Sorry, just to interject that I think something that's very important for people to realize is that it's okay to not be okay. I think sometimes we feel so pressured to just put on this, happy, smiley, everything is perfect. And that's not necessary. It's okay to be vulnerable with your team members and to tell them like, hey guys, I'm having a really tough day. And being able to trust them to know that, they can understand that and just give you a bit of leeway. It's really important. Any other questions for Sarah? Or comments, sharing stories? Okay.